Objectives: ensuring neither is disproportionately compromised. If you'd like more details on specific aspects of the judgment, let me know. The year was 1980, and India was going through a phase of rapid economic development. The government was actively involved in implementing policies to promote industrial growth, and the textile industry was a significant sector that received considerable attention. However, this growth came at a cost, and laborers were often exploited and deprived of their rights. It was against this backdrop that the Minerva Mills case emerged, challenging the government's policies and sparking a debate on the balance between individual rights and state power. As we delve deeper into the case, it's essential to recognize that the Minerva Mills judgment is more than just a legal dispute. It's a reflection of the tensions between different branches of government and the struggle to protect individual liberties. The case raises important questions about the role of the judiciary in a democratic setup and the limits of parliamentary power. These are questions that continue to resonate even today, making the Minerva Mills judgment a vital part of India's constitutional history. Moving on, let's explore the central issues that led to this landmark case. The government's policies were aimed at promoting industrial growth, but they often came at the cost of labor rights. The nationalization of banks and the takeover of private industries were just a few examples of the government's interventionist approach. However, these policies were often arbitrary and unfair, leading to widespread discontent among laborers and industrialists alike. The Minerva Mills, a textile mill in Bangalore, was one such industry that faced the wrath of the government's policies. The mill was nationalized, and its management was taken over by the government. However, the mill's owners and laborers challenged this decision, arguing that it was arbitrary and violated their fundamental rights. This challenge ultimately reached the Supreme Court, which had to decide whether the government's actions were constitutional or not. The conflict between the government's policies and the rights of laborers was at the heart of the Minerva Mills case. The laborers were fighting for their right to fair wages, better working conditions, and job security, while the government was trying to promote industrial growth at any cost. This conflict highlighted the tension between individual rights and state power, and the Supreme Court had to navigate this complex issue to arrive at a verdict. The challenges faced by Minerva Mills were numerous, and the mill's owners had to fight a long and arduous battle to protect their rights. The government's decision to nationalize the mill was seen as arbitrary and unfair, and the owners argued that it violated their fundamental right to carry on business. The laborers, on the other hand, were fighting for their right to fair wages and better working conditions. The government justified its decision to nationalize the mill by arguing that it was necessary to promote industrial growth and ensure the welfare of laborers. However, the mill's owners and laborers disputed this claim, arguing that the government's actions were motivated by political considerations rather than a genuine concern for the welfare of laborers. The Supreme Court had to consider these competing claims and arrive at a verdict that would balance individual rights with state power. The court had to decide whether the government's actions were constitutional or not, and whether the nationalization of the mill was justified. The legal arguments presented by both sides were complex and nuanced, and the Supreme Court had to navigate this complexity to arrive at a verdict. The government argued that its actions were justified under Article 31C of the Constitution, which allowed the state to nationalize industries in the interests of the general public. However, the mill's owners and laborers disputed this claim, arguing that the government's actions were arbitrary and violated their fundamental rights. The Supreme Court had to consider the constitutional provisions involved, including the Basic Structure Doctrine, which limits the power of Parliament to amend the Constitution. The court had to decide whether the government's actions were consistent with the Constitution and whether they violated the basic structure of the document. The court heard arguments from both sides, including the government's claim that its actions were justified under Article 31C. However, the court was not convinced by this argument, and it ultimately held that the government's actions were unconstitutional.